The sound of winter tires crunching against frozen asphalt echoed faintly outside the garage, but inside, everything was still. Gus Reyes leaned over his workbench, hands steady despite the ache that crept into his shoulders. The vintage Harley sat partially disassembled in front of him, a project he had poured his soul into since the fall. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the scent of cold metal mixed with motor oil created a quiet kind of comfort he had grown used to over the years. Then the door burst open. "Dad, you won't believe it!" Vivian's voice rang out, breathless with excitement. She stood in the doorway wrapped in her favorite wool coat, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes brighter than the stars that blinked above Brooklyn's rooftops. Gus straightened, wiping his hands on the same rag he always kept in his back pocket. He gave her a slow smile. "What's got you bouncing like a 7-year-old again?" Vivian grinned, stepping inside and pulling her gloves off with exaggerated flair. "He proposed," she said, barely able to contain herself. "Jasper proposed." She thrust her phone toward him. Screen lit up with a video paused at the image of Jasper down on one knee beside a gleaming restaurant table, crystal chandeliers twinkling above. Gus took the phone gently, careful not to smudge it too much with his oil-stained fingers. He tapped the play button. The restaurant was the kind Gus had only ever passed by on his way home from work, never daring to imagine going inside. White tablecloths, waiters in pressed uniforms, everything perfect and polished. In the video, Jasper wore an expensive suit that hugged his tall frame like it was tailored just for him, which it probably was. He held up a velvet box and asked Vivian to marry him while a violinist played softly in the background. Vivian's gasp and teary smile filled the speakers. Then came the applause from the other diners. It looked like something out of a romantic movie. Gus smiled and handed the phone back. "Of course I'm happy for you, sweetheart. You look so lit up." Vivian nodded, slipping the phone into her coat pocket. "He's everything I've ever wanted. He's smart, successful, confident. You're going to love him." Gus didn't respond right away. His eyes drifted toward the motorcycle engine on the bench, the scattered tools, the cracked cement floor beneath their feet. He wasn't sure what it was exactly. But something about Jasper's expression when the camera wasn't directly on him, something about how he waved away the waitress who refilled their water, tightened something deep in Gus's chest. "He said we're getting married in April," Vivian added, turning in a slow circle as if the very world had changed its axis. "It's going to be perfect. He's already started planning things. And his parents? They're traveling in Europe for 2 months. Isn't that amazing? Florence, Vienna, all of it. Europe. Huh?" Gus nodded. "Quite the life. But they'll be back just in time for the wedding," she continued. "In the meantime, Jasper says we don't have to wait to get everything going. He wants to have dinner with you tomorrow night. Just you and him. Says it's important to get to know each other." Gus felt the familiar weight of old dress clothes hanging in his closet before the image even formed in his mind. The suit he had worn to her college graduation. He wondered if it still fit. "Dinner sounds good," he said slowly. "Where at?" "The Golden Fork. It's that place near Central Park. Super classy, but Jasper knows someone there." Her smile dimmed just a fraction. "He wants to make a good impression." Gus offered a nod, his smile steady, though his thoughts were already moving ahead. "All right, I'll be there." Vivian stepped forward and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Dad. You'll love him once you really get to know him. I promise." She slipped back through the garage door into the house, leaving the scent of her perfume and cold air in her wake. Gus stood still for a long moment, his hand resting on the Harley's handlebars. His fingers twitched just slightly, and for the first time in a long time, they weren't steady. He picked up his wrench, but instead of returning to work, he turned and walked toward the small shelf where Maria's photo sat in a frame that had begun to fade. He looked at her gentle smile, the way her hand rested on his shoulder in that old snapshot. "She's engaged," he said quietly, "and I think I'm supposed to be happy." Outside, the cold deepened, and the garage light flickered just once before holding steady. The night settled over Brooklyn like a heavy blanket, quiet and unbothered, the kind of cold that crept into the bones even with the heater on. Gus Reyes sat at his old desk in the small home office that used to be Maria's reading room. The walls were still lined with her favorite books. A small lamp lit the corner, casting a warm circle of amber on the desk where an aging laptop hummed quietly. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Vivian had gone to bed hours ago, still humming from excitement, her ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. Gus had kissed her goodnight, told her he loved her, and then retreated to this room, the only place where he allowed himself to sit with his thoughts fully exposed. He opened Jasper's Facebook page. The header image showed Jasper at a yacht party, champagne raised mid-toast, surrounded by people with expensive smiles and sunglasses at night. His profile picture was a professional headshot, sharp jawline, confident gaze, custom-tailored suit. Gus scrolled. There were posts about high-end client meetings, travel photos from Milan, and a long post about working smarter, not harder. In one caption, Jasper posed beside a new BMW with the words, "Work hard enough so you never have to explain your job to people who change tires." Gus read that twice. He leaned back in the chair, the frame creaking beneath him. His eyes shifted to a small photograph on the wall, Maria holding infant Vivian on her lap, both of them wrapped in that same blue quilt that now lay folded on the living room couch. He touched the edge of the frame with one rough fingertip. He clicked over to Instagram. There, Jasper posted daily, gym selfies, whiskey recommendations, quotes about winners and losers. Gus wasn't one to judge a man by his social media, but none of this felt like someone who truly saw Vivian for who she was. Someone who found meaning in home-cooked meals and handwritten cards. Someone who kept her mother's laugh alive in the kitchen every holiday season. Then he saw a comment, buried under a photo from last week. A friend of Jasper's had written, "Finally met the dad. How's the mechanic from Brooklyn?" And Jasper had replied, "Chill guy. Simple. Shouldn't be a problem." Gus's jaw tightened. Simple. Shouldn't be a problem. He stared at the screen, not angry, not even offended, just hollow. Like something deep had been scratched in a place that had long been scarred over. A familiar ache, one he thought he had made peace with when Maria passed away. He minimized the screen, took off his glasses and rubbed his face. The house was silent. Even the old radiator had stopped clicking. He stood, walked slowly into the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. As he sipped, his gaze drifted to the corner of the living room, where Maria's armchair still sat. He had never moved it. That chair had held bedtime stories, whispered prayers, and the quiet dignity of a woman who never asked for more than what they had. He whispered into the stillness, "You'd see it too, wouldn't you?" He turned out the light and started walking back toward the bedroom, but paused by the door to Vivian's room. It was shut, soft light leaking from beneath. He didn't knock. Instead, he whispered low enough so only the silence could hear him. "I'm not trying to take your happiness. I'm trying to make sure it's real." He returned to his office, pulled the laptop back open, and started reading more. This time, he wasn't just scrolling. He was watching. The tie felt tight. Gus stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the knot for the third time. It had been years since he wore this suit. Last time was Vivian's college graduation, and now it hung a little looser at the shoulders, a little tighter at the waist. He smoothed the front of the jacket, then looked down at his shoes. Scuffed. Polished as best as he could manage, but still worn at the toes. He heard Vivian's voice from the kitchen. "Jasper says he already made the reservation. 7 o'clock sharp." Gus looked at his watch. "I'll be on time." She peeked her head in and smiled. "You look good, Dad." He smiled back. "We'll see if the restaurant agrees." The Golden Fork stood just off Central Park, wrapped in gold-toned glass and trimmed hedges. The doorman looked Gus up and down, then offered a nod that felt more like permission than welcome. Inside, everything gleamed. The air smelled like citrus and money. Chandeliers hovered above a sea of white tablecloths, crystal glassware catching soft candlelight. Jasper was already there. He stood as Gus approached, hands tucked casually into the pockets of a sleek gray suit, that looked like it cost more than Gus's entire monthly bills. "Gus," Jasper said with a wide smile, extending a hand. "Glad you could make it." Gus shook it, noting how quick and firm it was, measured, not warm. "Hope you found the place okay?" Jasper gestured to the booth. "Bit of a maze if you're not used to Manhattan." Gus slid into the booth and nodded. "I've been here before, years ago. Maria liked walking Central Park in the fall." Jasper didn't react to the name. Instead, he snapped his fingers at a waiter and ordered a bottle of French wine without asking. The waiter nodded and vanished like smoke. "You like red, right?" Jasper asked, already pouring himself a glass. "It's one of their best. Smooth finish." Gus glanced at the menu and folded it shut. He wasn't hungry anymore. "So," Jasper leaned back, arms spread across the booth. "I figured we should have this talk, man to man, family stuff." Gus nodded slowly. "I agree." Vivian's name floated between them, unspoken for a long pause. "She's everything to me," Gus said finally. "She's pretty amazing," Jasper replied. "Sweet, kind, obedient. Well, not in a weird way, just adaptable." Gus's brow tightened. "Adaptable?" "Yeah, open-minded, easy to guide. She's ready for the life I can give her." Jasper sipped his wine. "Which will be a good one?" Gus said nothing. The waiter returned with a dish of sea bass and truffle risotto for Jasper. Gus had asked for the simplest steak on the menu, and it came dressed like it was afraid of being eaten. Small, artistic, barely cooked. Jasper laughed. "They call that medium rare. Gotta love fine dining, right?" The meal passed in polite conversation, but each word from Jasper weighed heavier than the last. Every compliment about Vivian came wrapped in possessiveness. Every mention of family came with a hint of transaction, like this marriage was a deal already sealed. Then came the check. The waiter placed the leather-bound folder gently between them. Jasper slid it toward Gus with a practiced motion, never breaking eye contact. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "You invited me after all." Gus didn't flinch. He opened the folder. $347.60. He placed his old credit card on top and closed it without a word. Jasper chuckled. "Appreciate it. Mature adults always find ways to get along." Gus stood. "I didn't invite you," he said, voice quiet but firm. "You invited yourself into my daughter's life, and I'm still deciding if you deserve to stay." Jasper's smile faltered for a second, but just a second. As Gus turned to leave, he passed the waiter, pulled a 10 and 2 5s from his wallet, and placed them gently into the man's hand. "Tips on me," he said softly. "Some people forget that part." Outside, the wind had picked up. Gus tucked his collar higher and started walking toward the subway. The city lights sparkled, uncaring. Behind him, the glittering restaurant faded into the night. Spring came early that year. April sunlight filtered through cherry blossoms lining the white stone walkways of eternal gardens, casting soft pink shadows onto the manicured lawns. Everything looked like it belonged in a wedding magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from silk canopies. Silver-trimmed chairs stood in perfect rows, and every table was dressed in white lace and fresh peonies. Gus Reyes stood at the edge of it all, a single guest in a perfectly choreographed show. His suit was pressed, his shoes polished, and his posture quiet. He watched as servers passed with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres he couldn't pronounce. He declined every offer with a polite shake of the head. Vivian, radiant in her mother's wedding dress, moved through the crowd like sunlight itself. She looked beautiful. Not the kind of beauty from makeup or styling, but something older, deeper, like her mother had walked beside her, whispering comfort with each step. Gus kept his distance. She was surrounded by guests from Jasper's world, colleagues, investors, names from magazines Gus never read. He recognized no one. A few nodded politely. No one lingered. The ceremony had gone smoothly. Jasper wore a designer tuxedo and smiled through his vows, his voice clear and strong. Vivian had held back tears, the good kind. Gus had given her away with steady hands, placing her arm into Jasper's with all the grace he could muster. Not for Jasper's sake. For hers. Then came the reception. Gus was seated near the back, far from the head table, close to the kitchen doors. No name card, just a folded paper that read, "Father of the Bride," in simple script. He didn't mind. He didn't need a spotlight. But apparently, someone thought he needed a reminder of his place. "Gus," Jasper called out across the room, waving as if to a waiter. "Come take a seat up front, huh? Let's not pretend you don't want to be part of the big table." People laughed lightly. Vivian turned, confused. Gus stood, holding his drink carefully. He walked toward the table where Jasper now stood beside an empty chair. Jasper gestured grandly. "Right here, sir. We saved you a special spot." Gus moved to sit. Just as he began to lower himself, Jasper pulled the chair away. It happened fast. Gus fell hard onto the polished marble floor, glass shattering beside him. Silence swept the room. Utensils paused midair. A woman near the cake gasped. Jasper smiled. "Guess you were more fragile than I thought." Gus didn't move right away. He sat on the ground, pain radiating up his hip, but not from the fall, from the weight of humiliation pressing into his chest like ice. Vivian rushed forward. "Dad, are you okay?" Gus met her eyes, steady. "I'm fine." Jasper chuckled nervously. "It was just a joke. Come on, lighten up." Someone helped Gus to his feet. He adjusted his jacket and brushed his palms together. The shattered glass was swept up quickly, like it never happened. Then a new voice rose behind the crowd. "What the hell did you just do?" Heads turned. An older man, tall and square-shouldered, stepped through the doorway. His silver hair caught the sunlight like steel. His wife, elegant in navy blue, followed close behind. It was Saul Hale, Jasper's father. He crossed the floor quickly, his eyes locked on Gus, not his son. "You," Saul whispered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "I know you." Gus blinked. "Sir?" "In Iraq, Camp Falcon, November 2006. You pulled me out after the mortar hit. Your left arm was bleeding. You wouldn't leave without me." Jasper's face went pale. Gus nodded slowly. "You're Captain Saul Hale." "You saved my damn life," Saul said, voice rising. "You carried me 2 clicks to safety. And now, my son, my own son, humiliates you in front of your daughter?" Gasps, murmurs. Someone dropped a glass. Saul turned on Jasper, fire in his eyes. "Do you even know who this man is? What he's done? He's more honorable than anyone here, including you." Jasper opened his mouth, but no sound came. Vivian looked between them, stunned. Nancy Hale stepped forward, placing a hand on Gus's arm. "We are so sorry," she whispered, eyes full of tears. So sorry." Gus stood still, the room spinning around him. Not with dizziness, but with clarity. He had said nothing cruel, hadn't shouted, hadn't made a scene. But now the truth stood in the center of the room, undeniable and bright. The man who was quietly shoved to the side was the one who had saved a life and never asked for thanks. It was nearly midnight when the doorbell rang. Gus had just finished cleaning up the small kitchen. The silence of his Brooklyn home had always been a comfort, but tonight it felt heavier, filled with echoes of what had happened that afternoon at the wedding. The scene played over in his mind. The fall, the crowd, Saul's voice shaking with rage, and Vivian's face caught between horror and revelation. He opened the door. Jasper stood on the porch, his tie loosened, his jacket gone. His eyes were bloodshot, either from drinks or fury. Maybe both. "May I come in?" Jasper asked, already stepping forward. Gus held firm, blocking the door. "Depends. What are you here for?" Jasper's lips curled into a smirk, but it did not reach his eyes. "You think you've won something, don't you?" "I wasn't playing a game." "No? Then why show up with your war story and your quiet little dignity act? My father of all people, defended you, in front of everyone. Gus studied him. Your father told the truth. I didn't ask him to. Jasper took a step closer. You embarrassed me. You turned my wedding into your redemption arc. What do you want? Money? Respect? I want my daughter to be safe, Gus replied, voice even. I want her to be loved, not owned. Jasper laughed bitterly. She trusts you too much, that's the problem. You've always had her wrapped around your blue-collar finger. Gus said nothing. You think just because you dragged my dad out of a war zone that makes you a better man? Jasper snapped. It was decades ago. Nobody cares. Apparently he still does, Gus said quietly. Jasper's hands balled into fists. You're going to lose her. If you keep pushing, she'll walk away from you. Gus stepped onto the porch, closing the space between them. Not threatening, just present, steady. I've already lost more than you could understand, Gus said. A wife, brothers in arms, time. But I never lost myself. Jasper blinked. I won't fight you, Jasper, Gus continued. You're not worth that. But if you ever speak to her the way you just spoke to me, you'll regret it. For the first time, Jasper looked unsure. His anger flickered. I've made mistakes, he muttered, but I love her. Gus's voice softened. Then prove it. Not to me. To her. Because right now, she's starting to see the man behind the charm. Jasper turned without another word and walked down the front steps, disappearing into the shadows of the street. The sound of his footsteps echoed until they faded. Gus closed the door gently. He walked into the living room, picked up the framed photo of Maria from the shelf, and stared at it a moment. I kept the promise, he said quietly, but it's not over yet. The next morning, he brewed coffee, poured it into a thermos, and tucked a small bouquet of daisies into a brown paper wrap, Vivian's favorite, just like her mother's. He stepped out the door into the quiet Brooklyn morning, not to lecture, not to scold, but to tell the truth. Vivian sat on the edge of her bed, still in her robe, eyes fixed on the engagement ring lying in her palm. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet for a Saturday morning in Manhattan. No music played, no coffee brewed, no texts pinged on her phone, just the silence of confusion. She had barely slept. Her wedding dress, now wrinkled and abandoned, hung half-zipped over the bedroom chair. Her makeup was smudged, and her heart ached with questions. How had she missed it? The knock at her door was soft, but sure. When she opened it, her father stood there with a bouquet of daisies in his hand, and a warmth in his eyes that reached straight to her chest. I made coffee, he said, lifting a thermos. Figured you might need both. Vivian stepped aside. I was hoping you'd come. They sat at the small kitchen table, where a single mug waited beside a folded napkin. Gus poured her coffee the way Maria used to. 2 sugars, splash of milk, no questions. He didn't speak right away. He let her sit with the comfort. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. For what? For not seeing it sooner. For letting him, she paused, eyes misting, treat you that way. Gus shook his head. Viv, love doesn't always come wrapped in the right language. Sometimes it comes with charm, sometimes with silence. But the kind that lasts, it always comes with respect. Vivian nodded slowly. He came by last night, you know? I know, Gus said. What did he say? He said he loved you. I told him to prove it. She looked down at her coffee, then at the daisies. I'm not sure I want him to. Gus reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. That's your decision. Not mine. Not his. Yours. A long silence passed between them, comfortable, full of memory. Then, a second knock at the door. Vivian stood, heart beating faster. She opened it to find Jasper standing there, clean-shaven, eyes tired, but clear. In his hands, he held nothing. No flowers, No speech. Just himself. "I don't deserve you," he said. Vivian didn't respond. "I was raised to win," Jasper continued. "To conquer. To lead. But you're not something to win. You're someone to walk beside." Gus watched quietly from the kitchen. Jasper stepped inside just far enough to be heard. "I'm sorry for everything I said. To your father. To you. To myself. I thought respect was something people gave me. Turns out it's something I had to earn." Vivian stared at him, unsure. Why now? "Because yesterday I saw the kind of man I should have been all along," Jasper said. "And it wasn't me. It was him." He looked toward Gus. "I will never be the man you are, sir, but I'd like to learn how." Gus met his gaze, measured, quiet, then nodded once. Vivian stepped back, opened the door wider. "Come in. 1 cup of coffee. That's all I can offer right now." Jasper smiled. "That's more than I deserve." They sat together, 3 people around a small table in a Manhattan kitchen, with daisies and second chances between them. Later that day, Vivian slipped the ring into a drawer, not as rejection, but as a pause. Love, she realized, wasn't something to rush. It was something to earn. And Gus, from his seat by the window, holding Maria's photo in one hand and his coffee in the other, knew. He had kept the promise. Sometimes, the loudest moments in life come not from shouting, but from silence. The kind of silence that follows a man quietly standing back up after being pushed down. What happened that spring afternoon at Eternal Gardens may have looked like just another wedding gone sideways. But beneath the surface, something deeper was unfolding. A father, long underestimated, rose with the quiet dignity of a man who knew who he was, even when the world forgot. This story wasn't about revenge or about making a scene. It was about character, the kind of character that does not beg to be seen but shines when it must. Gus never asked for recognition. He never demanded respect. But when the truth came to light, it reminded everyone watching that real honor doesn't wear designer suits or speak with polished charm. Sometimes it wears an old watch, carries calloused hands, and shows up with nothing more than love and a promise to protect. At its heart, this is a story about restraint and the gentle strength of knowing when to speak and when to simply stand, about what it means to be looked down on and still choose to look up. And more than anything, it is a reminder that justice, when it arrives, often does so through the most unexpected doors, because dignity cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And Gus never did. The lesson here is quiet, but strong. Hold fast to your values. Speak the truth with grace. And when the moment comes, stand, even if you stand alone. Not to fight back in anger, but to defend what's right with patience, compassion, and truth. It's not just about claiming justice. It's about creating something better on the other side of pain. Like a steady porch light left on in the fog, one quiet act of integrity can guide us, can guide others, through the darkest corners of life. So maybe, next time we're tempted to size someone up by their clothes, their job, or the weight of their wallet, we'll pause. And we'll remember Gus. Remember that wisdom can come from a garage, that courage can wear a mechanic's boots, and that sometimes the strongest men speak the least, but mean the most. Take a moment to sit with this story. Think of someone in your life who has been quietly strong. Maybe it's your father. Maybe it's you. And if this story reached you in a quiet place, the kind that only stories like this can find, consider passing it on. Not for clicks, not for likes, but because maybe someone else out there needs to remember that they matter too. After all, we're all just trying to find our way home, with a little dignity left in our pockets and maybe a daisy or two in hand.